All right, so we'll start with Sergio. Sergio Carrillo, he's our California Democratic Party Region 16 chair for Assembly Districts 58, 63, and our District 66, and also District 70. And he's the Los Angeles County Democratic Party vice chair. Our own Connie Sullivan is PV Dems' first VP. She's the chair of the LA County Democrat Party's Assembly District 66. And I'm looking at Nancy, I'm not sure why, but she's in speaker view here.
Sergio's the vice chair of the whole thing. I'm just the chair of the Assembly District.
Yeah, but I just wanted to note that you were also a chair of just the one district under him. Yeah. Anyway, when Congressman Ted Lieu comes on, I did want to note he's our California District 33 representative. I'm going to wait to say my talking points until he comes on then. So we're going to start with Sergio. And what we want to do, Sergio, is what I had wanted to do if Congressman Lieu is here, because he had to leave by 4, is have you each speak, you first, and then Congressman Lieu, and then do questions. But if he's not on, we will have you speak and then questions. So we'll see what happens. Welcome.
Thank you, Ann, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Am I on? Yes? Okay, good. It's weird because the other day I was talking into the microphone and I didn't realize I was muted like for 3 minutes. So I'm glad you can hear me. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation to come today to the Palos Verdes Democrats to talk about the elections that we had on November 3rd. I know you wanted me to talk about local races primarily, but I will talk about whatever you want in case the congressman does not arrive. But and if he does, I understand his schedule is very busy. I don't mind moving over so he can go first, obviously, so that we can accommodate him. Well, I'm glad that we have a new president, first of all. I know it took a few days, but I just want to talk about, first of all, say thank you to all of you. Thank you to all of you who were involved in this election, for making phone calls, for making contributions, for writing postcards, for sending text messages, for doing all that we did, not just here in California, but across the country. You know, the Biden campaign announced last week that 38% of all phone calls that were made into battleground states were made by Californians, were made by people here in the state of California. And so although we are in a very big blue state and many of us feel like, you know, there's not much we can do here, you are the reasons why today Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are the president and vice president elect of this country. It's Californians who made that phone call, those calls. So I want to just say thank you to all of you for that. Whether it was through CDP or any of the other grassroots organizations, the many that are out there who are all partners in this struggle for justice, really, thank you to all of you. We have a new president. It's sad that this current president has not yet conceded the election, or even worse, allowed the transition to start officially. It is starting. The Biden campaign is moving forward with it, but there is a law, basically, I guess. Congress appropriates money for a transition, and it allows the president-elect to begin using public funds to begin that transition, to look into the different agencies, to talk to different folks. It gives people clearance and what have you. But the way that happens is a director of the General Services Administration needs to approve. And he basically has been told by the president not to do that. And in the past, this person on their own has done this, has approved the transition to begin. But we've never been in a situation where we're at now. You know, the reason they do this is because in 2001, after 9/11, we didn't have a president. We didn't have a winner for 36 days. For 36 days, we didn't know if the president was going to be Al Gore or George W. Bush. And so there was no transition that began. And there were many experts in the intelligence community who feel that had that it caused us not to be as prepared had the administration been able to start transitioning 36 days earlier. And so because of that, they started this whole process. Well, with whole COVID going on and the president basically abdicating his responsibility now, not worrying about this, I just feel that this is going to be a situation that's really bad. The good thing is that most Republicans a lot of Republicans now are starting to ask that and encourage GSD to recognize the transition so that we can begin that whole process of doing things there. The sad part is that currently today, the United States Senate is about 50 Republicans and 48 Democrats. And we have two runoffs in, I think it's 51 days now, on January 5th. Everything we do depends on these two seats. If we were to pick up these two seats, it'd be an even 50-50 tie. And with the vice president being Kamala Harris, we would have a majority in the Senate. There's about, 5 million voters, I think I was told, in Georgia. There's more voters in LA County than the entire state of Georgia. And so we are going to be doing some phone calling in Georgia. But we are having a conversation this week about how we do that so that we don't overwhelm 5 million people. Because Californians, if we do as well of a job that we did the last few weeks there, we would call every single voter in California and Georgia 10 times within the next week. And so we are going to have these discussions. We do need to raise money. So we will have some virtual fundraisers for the runoffs in Georgia. But that is where we are at there. I mean, we are looking at right now a 50 to 48 majority, Republican majority in the Congress, depending on what happens in 51 days. I think I'm going to go to Georgia. I just feel like I want to be there, but this whole COVID thing that scares me, I'm not sure, but I'm like kind of torn. So I haven't yet decided if I'm going out there or not, but there are a lot of people who are actually walking door to door safely, I guess, with masks and PPE and what have you. But there are going to be opportunities to do that there as well. And then in the House, Ann mentioned earlier that both Harley Ruda and Gil Cisneros have conceded their races to their Republican opponents. There's still two races to be too close to call here in California. One is in the California 21st, TJ Cox, who's behind by about 2,000 votes. And then in the California 25th, as Ann mentioned, Christy Smith, that's behind about 104 votes. The DCCC and the AP and all the other media outlets are not ready to call either one of those two races. They both are very too close to call, and we need help curing ballots. So in California, we have the opportunity to help with and correct or cure ballots. If there is a signature that's missing, some people might have forgot to sign their ballot. If there is the wrong address or what have you, there are opportunities to cure these ballots. We have X number of days in which to get that to happen. And we are recruiting volunteers both in the 21st and in the 25th districts to do that. The 21st is around Fresno area. And of course, the 25th, Christy Smith, is out here near the Antelope Valley. If you have opportunities to volunteer to help cure ballots, I will put a link on the chat in a few minutes. We are recruiting volunteers to still do that. We know that the DTRIP believes that a lot of those ballots are going to be Democratic ballots, which is why, especially up in the Fresno area. And so we are really recruiting volunteers to come out there and help with the curing of the ballots. I do know the Congress member is on, and I will yield now to the Congress member. I know that his schedule is a lot busier than mine, so I will pass the mic over back to you.
Thank you. And welcome, Congressman Lieu. We know that you're very active and busy, and so thank you for joining us. What we wanted to do is have both of you talk first, and then we have quite a few questions, some that are just for you and some that are for both of you. So I also noticed that you're very active in Twitter, and yesterday it was very cute how you shared the real reason why Trump didn't give a speech at the March for Trump rally in Washington, D.C., saying the crowd size was embarrassingly small, so Trump decided to play golf rather than speak to the small base that showed up. I want to make sure that people know that you put out a weekly, the Lieu Review, with the latest COVID-19 updates and resources. Maybe you could talk to that today, and you can go to his website if you're not receiving it. But here is Congressman Lieu.
Thank you, Ann, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you, Sergio, for your leadership and everyone for participating today. So you're right. If 1 million people actually did show up yesterday in Washington, D.C., Donald Trump absolutely would have spoken to them. But according to official D.C. estimates, it was somewhere around 5,000, give or take a few thousand. And that also included counter protesters. So it really was embarrassingly small showing. And what Donald Trump cannot stop in any way is that on January 20th, he's going to be escorted from the White House. So I'm going to talk about the elections and then answer any questions you may have. First thing you should know is that their presidential election was not close. Joe Biden won by over 5 million votes, on track to beating Donald Trump by somewhere between 6 and 7 million. He's going to get the highest vote share of any challenger since FDR. In addition, Joe Biden won multiple swing states to get an electoral college margin of 306 votes. Biden is ahead of Trump in Pennsylvania by over 60,000 votes, ahead of Trump in Michigan by over 140,000 votes. None of this is close. And so there's really nothing Donald Trump can do to reverse the results of the presidential election. In the Senate, we would have liked to have gained more seats, but we did gain 1 seat. And then there's a chance in the runoffs in Georgia to gain 2 more seats, and then that would give Democrats control of the Senate. In the House, we did hold the House. However, we did lose a number of seats, and we need to look at why that happened. The DCCC is doing a deep dive, so we're waiting to get all the data, and then we'll draw conclusions, and then make sure that we have the best strategy possible for the next 2 years so that we still hold the House 2 years from now. I suspect what it's going to show is that Donald Trump turned out his base. He also turned out the Democratic base. So in fact, there was a blue wave. There also was a red wave. Just that the red wave was somewhat smaller than a blue wave, and that's why Joe Biden is going to be president. But Donald Trump did turn out his base. And then at the same time, what we already know, just based on how many more votes Biden got compared to down ballot Democratic incumbents and candidates, is there were a number of people, Republicans and independents, who specifically went out during the election to reject Donald Trump and vote against him. But they're also Republicans, and so they acted Republican down ballot. So my take is these Republican voters were not rejecting the Republican Party. They were rejecting Donald Trump, and they were rejecting Trumpism. But they're still Republicans, so they're going to vote like Republicans on ballot issues and for Republican candidates. So I suspect that's also what happened as well. And then there were just some districts where there was literally nothing we could do. So in Colin Peterson's district in Minnesota, Donald Trump won that district by over 30 points. Our Democratic incumbent simply cannot survive that. In Max Rose's district in New York, Donald Trump won that district by over 25 points. There's really not much anyone or Max Rose can do to hold on to that seat. So you just had some seats where we were deep in Republican territory, and when Republicans turn out, we're going to lose those seats. But we do know what we do want to find out why we did lose some closer seats, and that's what the DCCC is doing right now. But at the end of the day, we took out an incumbent president. Very hard to do, especially when Donald Trump was trying to suppress the vote, trying to use the federal government to benefit him. He had Air Force One that he could fly around. He had all the trappings of power. And despite all that, the American people rose up and ejected him from the White House. That is quite an accomplishment. And we should really understand how important it is, because it's not just Donald Trump leaving on January 20th. It's also Betsy DeVos and Bill Barr and Stephen Miller and Secretary Pompeo and on down the line. You're taking out not just Donald Trump, but an entire cadre of corrupt officials, of people who put their own interests above that of Americans. And I think in the next few months, we're just going to see what a massive difference it is under a Biden-Harris administration. So with that, happy to answer any questions you may have, and thanks so much for inviting me.
Unmute. Okay, well, you've touched on some of them, but we're going to go a little bit more in depth. And Sergio, you can click in here also, okay? So the first one, Sergio talked about it a little bit in terms of the two Senate seats that are up in Georgia, right? So what are the best things that we can do to win those 2 Senate seats in Georgia? How can we help the senators who are in runoffs secure these seats? And then in your opinion, will our Senate candidates in Georgia benefit by Trump not being on the ballot in January? So those all kind of all go together.
Sure. Well, the best thing you can do is actually decide to move to Georgia, become a resident of Georgia, and then vote. But if you're not willing to do that, then here are some other things you can do. Certainly reach out to voters is very important through phone banking and text banking. Giving resources to candidates are important. When you give directly to John Ossoff or Reverend Warnock, they can use that money and basically buy TV advertising at 1/4 the price that a super PAC would spend. So there's all sorts of different things you can do, and consider doing some or all of them.
Did you want to say anything, Sergio, on that? Or?
Yeah, and we, like I mentioned earlier, we know how to make phone calls into battleground states. 38% of all calls that were made into battleground states, according to the Biden campaign, came from California. So we're going to do a lot of phone calling, texting into Georgia. Obviously, we will be holding some virtual fundraisers as well to raise money for them. But we are already organizing. We're going to be having, I forgot what we're calling it, swinging Sundays or something like that to call into the area. So all of that will be out in the next few days. We just finished and culminated our executive board meeting like a few hours ago, 3 hours ago it ended. And so a lot of this came out of that. But you'll be noticing signups soon to do online phoning and online texting into Georgia. Okay. But moving to Georgia is a great idea too, Court. I agree with the congressman.
I don't think you can get residency that early, can you? One other thing, Congressman Lieu, when you were on with us before, you talked about, I think there was 5 states that you were trying to flip. And I was wondering if you could give us some status on those states that you had talked to us before about. That you were, before the election, that you felt that they needed to flip blue.
Right. So before the election, I stated that Joe Biden's singular mission was to win Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. If he did that, he'd be president. So he did that. In addition, he went above and beyond and also flipped Georgia as well as Arizona. And so that was fantastic. And I think at the end of the day, the American people will come to see that this election really was not close. Donald Trump previously has described 306 electoral votes as a landslide. That's what Joe Biden got. So in 4 years, I think what you'll see happen is the Sun Belt states continue to trend Democratic. Essentially, Colorado and New Mexico and Nevada are basically Democratic, although Nevada is a little harder. And then we have to keep working on Arizona and Georgia, but I think those states will continue to trend Democratic. And then we have to hold on to the Rust Belt states of Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. And if that happens, then 4 years from now, the next president will also be a Democrat.
Okay. This came over chat, and I was going to do the pre-questions first, but this one had to do with something you just talked about. So if you are asking people to give to John Ossoff and Warnock's campaigns, someone was saying, can you explain why Super PAC pays 4 times what they would pay for advertising?
Sure, it's just the way that these rules and regulations are set up with television. For whatever reason, I'm not sure what the reason is, but a candidate can buy TV advertising at basically 20 to 25% of the price that a Super PAC pays. I don't know why it is that way, but it is that way.
Okay. All right, so moving on to the next question. Are there plans to bring, this has to do with the transition, are there plans to bring legal action to force the transition of Biden and his team? And what happens if the GSA does not greenlight the transition even after the election is certified? Can a court intervene?
So I think we should haul in the GSA person who's holding this up. Unfortunately, what I've learned, I think many of us have learned in the last 4 years, is that we essentially have no enforcement mechanism for congressional subpoenas. The only way we can enforce our subpoenas is through litigation, and that takes years. So we're still litigating, trying to get Don McGahn in to appear before the House Judiciary Committee to talk about obstruction of justice. By time that we finish this litigation, no one's going to care. And so people already don't care now. And it's just clear to me that when you don't have an effective enforcement mechanism, or one that takes years, essentially you have no enforcement mechanism. And that's why I think we need to change the House rules to allow inherent contempt. It's a power that Supreme Court has recognized that Congress has had. It would allow us, for example, to fine witnesses money for disobeying congressional subpoenas. I have legislation on that. It would allow us to fine witnesses up to $100,000 if they continue to keep ignoring congressional subpoenas. And it simply requires a rules change in the House of Representatives, which means we could do this with majority vote in the House. We wouldn't need the Senate or the executive branch to concur. So hopefully we can get that done. And I keep pushing for it, so we'll see what happens.
Do you think that by the end of the year, do you think there's a chance to pass a COVID relief and economic aid package before Biden takes office? I know you in the House have done it, but.
I do. So the House has already passed 2 HEROES Act bills. One was $3.4 trillion that we passed in March of this year. And unfortunately, the White House and the Senate basically twiddled their thumbs for most of the time. They didn't do anything. So we negotiated against ourselves and then passed a second version that was $2.2 trillion. So there's actually 2 versions that already passed the House. I am pleased that Mitch McConnell did say that he wanted to see a COVID relief package during a lame duck session get passed. So that is a change from what he said before. So we'll see if that change is actually going to be made real in the U.S. Senate.
Yeah. I'm not holding my breath. Okay, we're going to go a little bit to a different topic. What legislation will Congress be able to pass to fight global warming if Republicans keep control of the Senate, if both Georgia seats are won by Democrats? We have a couple options here. And would it be useful to push for more funding for renewable energy and energy efficiency separate from legislation that says something about global warming?
The Biden administration can do a fair amount simply through executive orders. So one thing that Joe Biden's going to do is put the U.S. back into the Paris Climate Accords. That's important, and that's a good thing. He can also reverse all the bad environmental executive orders that Donald Trump signed, and then he can do new executive orders for the next 4 years in terms of the environment. If Republicans control the Senate, then you're not going to see significant climate change legislation pass in the next 2 years. That's my view. So these 2 races in Georgia are very important. But there are some things we could do. I do or have seen bipartisan support for incentives for renewable energy. There are some things you can do with Republicans that work on making it easier, for example, to install solar panels, to make wind energy more available. There are a lot of things that if you sort of talk about in terms of renewable energy, you can get Republicans on board.
So it gets back to the race in Georgia. So I want to, there's other questions that are coming back to that one. So well, first of all, in your field, what do you think will get both seats in Georgia? I mean, what do you?
It's hard to know. One thing, it's hard to predict in politics. I mean, Georgia is what I would call a deep red state that went purple in the presidential election. But not that long ago, it was a deep red state. So it's really not going to be easy to win the 2 Senate races in Georgia. A lot of what's going on are dynamics that I don't know how it plays out in Georgia. So if you have the president continuing to tell his base that the elections are rigged, it might actually depress their turnout because it's going to make them less likely to vote if they think their vote won't count or won't matter. So I don't know how that plays into what happens in January. At the same time, voters tend to like divided government. I would rather voters not look at it that way when it came to Democratic control. But what you do see is independents tend to seem that divided government is better. I actually think it's probably not the case, but we're going to have to overcome that as well.
There was an article in today's LA Times where they do a debate between the two op-ed people, and Republicans he said the Republicans like divided government when they're not president.
Right.
You know, for those of us who are or know about Ossoff, a lot of people didn't know about the other Senate race. They didn't know about Warnock. Is there a reason for that there was more press on Ossoff versus Warnock, and we don't see that that he was raising, at least here in California, for those of us who were getting emails, we weren't seeing his name.
Well, I think Ossoff has more name ID because he ran in a special election last term. Actually, I think it was actually a few years ago for Congress, and raised a stupendous amount of money in that race. So I think that's why he's somewhat more well-known to people outside of Georgia. But this election, I think there's going to be a lot of money spent on both sides. And so both people have their name IDs pretty darn high in Georgia by the time the election goes around.
Okay, I'm going to move on. People would like to know your view on the national popular vote, interstate compact as an alternative to the Electoral College.
So I support it. And as many of you know, the way that electors are awarded is up to state law. So a state could choose how it wants to award its electors for Electoral College, and a state could say, we're going to award our electors based on which candidate wins the national popular vote. And if enough states do that, then de facto, you've got a national popular vote. Right now, we don't have enough states to have done that, but as long as we keep adding states to it, we're making progress. What you see with the Electoral College is, I think, an undemocratic, antiquated system. If we didn't have it, no one would be talking about this election because it was basically a blowout. I mean, Joe Biden beat Donald Trump. It's going to be over 6 million votes at the end of the day. That is not close.
Agree.
Anything you have on that one, Sergio? Or
No, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, if that were the case, Hillary would have won, Al Gore would have won. It would be a lot different today. Agree.
So since you're on, Sergio, question for both you and Congressman Lieu is, who do you think Governor Newsom should appoint to fill Kamala Harris's term? And who is your choice?
Wow, if we all knew that, I mean, man, we would be wealthy people.
Well, but wow. So if you don't know, maybe you could just, who is your choice then?
Well, I don't have a choice. I'm not the governor, but I think there's a lot of names out there that are good names. I mean, there's arguments on all sides. There's arguments of appointing a Latino because of the large Latino population in the state of California. There's arguments about appointing a woman to replace Kamala, an African-American woman to replace Kamala. I like to remind people that Kamala is also Asian American. And so there's push for that. I have friends who are being considered. Alex Padilla is one of those. Robert Garcia of Long Beach is another. So I don't know. I think it's I don't envy the governor right now. Let's just say that. I don't know. The congressman might have a different answer to that.
I am enthusiastically neutral.
Okay. Very good. Let me, that's, okay. So, let me see. I want to go to one that could be for both of you. Someone commented, some of my long-held truisms about elections were overturned in this election in California. I always thought that large turnout always advantaged Democrats, but Ruta and Cisneros appear to be losing. They lost. Is it possible that universal mail-in balloting somehow disadvantaged these two congressmen?
That's a great question. So we have to do this deep dive and look at the data and see what happened. Now, Harley Ruta's district was always a hard district. It is a Republican district. He did have advantage last term of running against a crazy person, Dana Rohrabacher. That wasn't quite the case this time. And again, I think you saw that not only did Trump turn out his base, but a number of Republicans went out and voted specifically to reject Donald Trump, but they were not rejecting the Republican Party. So they acted like Republicans down ballot. So that's my general sense of what happened.
I agree as well. I think we will need to do a large analysis of what occurred in these races. But agree with the Congress member. A lot of people still came out to support Republicans. There was still that big push for their party. They might have rejected the president at the top, but they were still pushing for those who share their ideals and their values.
Okay. So what response, if any, does Congressman Lieu or Carrillo suggest the party selectees make to the flood of accusations of election fraud, official corruption, and moral turpitude that our neighbor Republicans make and have made over the past 4 years and apparently intend to continue through the coming period? How should we respond?
So one of the disappointing things is how silent Republicans are to crazy stuff that comes from Donald Trump. And the fact that many of them are enabling his sort of outrageous lies and his bad behavior. At the same time, the courts are rejecting all his lawsuits. I think they've now lost 20 lawsuits in court. The Biden administration is making a concerted effort to basically not give his lies any more oxygen. They're viewing this sort of like, Tony Bobulinski and those weird attacks about Hunter Biden. They're just trying to ignore it. Not necessarily a bad strategy, because when you sort of look at what's happening right now, you're not seeing million people marches every single night. You're sort of seeing the opposite. The overwhelming majority of Americans have accepted Joe Biden won and they're going on with their daily lives. And I think what the Biden-Harris campaign is doing is simply going on with what they would be doing, trying to transition into a new government come January. And they don't want to sort of keep talking about Donald Trump and his outrageous lies about election rigging. And I think the results do speak for themselves. The court cases are frivolous. Just to give you an example, in Arizona, one of their big cases, challenged 200 mail-in ballots. So at the end of the day, first of all, that they're going to lose that case. But even if they won, it makes zero difference because Joe Biden won, or is going to win, I think, somewhere between 12 and 14,000 ballots in Arizona. So you're just looking at stupid cases that make no difference. In Pennsylvania, they're challenging ballots that arrive after November 3rd, except Pennsylvania hasn't counted any of these ballots. And the actual number of those ballots after November 3rd are around 10,000. Again, even if they won that case, doesn't make a difference because Joe Biden is now ahead by over 60,000 ballots in Pennsylvania. So I think the Biden-Harris campaign is simply trying to ignore what Donald Trump does on Twitter. And so far, it seems to generally be working.
Sergio?
I agree. I mean, in the eyes of the president-elect, the election's over. He won. It's now time to govern and to transition into governing this country and healing it. And so in his eyes, election's over with. I agree. It's not going to give it any more life. We just need to continue and allow this madman just to go. I do believe, though, that the president, obviously, he's not, well, he is an idiot. He is in certain ways not. And I think by doing what he's doing, he's still trying to get his base a little excited. He's going to walk away. He's probably never going to concede. He'll acknowledge he lost, but he's going to say he lost because it was stolen. And for the next 4 years, we're going to have a lot of people talking about that. So, I mean, he knows what he's doing, but at the end of the day, he's going to go away and we need to move forward with governing. So I understand. That's why I agree with the congressman, with the president-elect as moving forward. The election's over with. We won.
Congressman Lieu, you running to be DCCC chair?
No, I'm running for re-election as co-chair of the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. It's known as the DPCC. And so we're responsible for messaging on the official side in the House of Representatives.
Okay.
Oh, I was about to spread a rumor right now. Wow, that was a good one.
Let me see. You got me off guard here. How can we better educate the public in general and red states in particular regarding what Democrats truly stand for? It seems the GOP have defined Democrats and too many people across the country have bought into this wrong image of us.
Well, that's a very good question. So on the official side, we've been messaging a for the people agenda based on protecting your healthcare, creating jobs, and fighting corruption. Those issues still resonate. I think what ended up happening is you had a lot of Republican attacks on various slogans that were used. None of it was coming from sort of the official messaging of the Democratic caucus, either at the Senate or House level. And you do have a problem with Fox News, right? That just repeats false lies and stupid stuff. There is a curious thing that seems to happen, which is if you look at it based on issues, generally the majority of the public agrees with Democrats on the various issues. So for example, in Florida, Democrats did not do well this election. At the same time, a $15 minimum wage was put in by the voters of Florida, something that Democrats repeatedly have championed and Republicans have opposed. so we need to figure out what's happening there. And why is it that voters, when they think of Democrats or Democratic Party, they have a certain view in their mind that does not reflect the majority of the Democratic Party.
I was going to add to that, but we'll get to you in a minute, Sergio. So in terms of misinformation, so there was a lot of misinformation on Facebook, and someone was asking whether it was worse in 2020 versus 2016. And one of the slogans, the defund the police, do you feel that that hurt us? So you can answer first, Congressman Lieu, and then Sergio.
So again, I think we need to do this deep dive of what happened. And I suspect, actually, I know different districts also receive different attacks because each congressional district is unique. So for example, I think many of us saw the ads Republicans use against Chrissy Smith. I don't really remember seeing defund the police ads being used against her. What I saw were ads that she allegedly raised taxes when she was in Sacramento. That's sort of the ads that I saw. With Gil Cisneros, the ads I saw on TV weren't defund the police. It was that he owned pharmaceutical stocks. And so I think we have to do this deep dive to see. Now, Max Rose certainly got a lot of defund the police ads because Staten Island just has a lot of police officers and so on. So I think it probably does depend on the district. Now, there is a fundamental truth at the end of the day, which is that to keep our majority, we don't keep it by winning districts that look like mine. It doesn't help to make a district bluer. What helps is we have to do two things in these swing districts, as well as in swing states when we want to win presidential elections. We have to energize the base, and then we've got to win independents, and in some cases, moderate Republicans. That is a tricky thing to do. It's not easy. Joe Biden did it. A number of our frontline members did it, but you've got to do both. You can't do one or the other. And that's why I think it's very important that we unify as a party and unify as a caucus, because you can't just say we're going to do one and not the other, because then we'll just be a minority party.
Sergio, do you want to add?
I do agree with everything he said. I do believe that so I have four brothers. One of them is a diehard Republican. I don't know how we came from the same womb, but we did. And then I have another brother who really is just apolitical. And he sort of is like my little focus group, I always ask him questions, what he feels. And I asked him the other day, I said, who did you vote for? He voted for Joe Biden. And I asked him what he thought about Joe Biden. He says, well, he's not Donald Trump. That's exactly what his answer was. I said, what about the Democratic Party? He goes, well, you guys are left wingers. You guys want to defund the police. You want to do this. You want to do that. The reason I bring that up is my brother, my older brother, who's a big Trump supporter, is not your average voter. I'm not your average voter, but my brother, who's apolitical, is your average voter. And so I think we do need to have a deep dive into these races, but how we also these bigger issues. And I think the president, unfortunately, did a good job in trying to label people and convince folks a certain way. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are Cuban, and the whole word of Joe Biden's a communist, Joe Biden's a socialist, was the reason enough for people to vote not for him, because it reminded them of Castro. And we saw we don't know if that's the reason why, but we saw that there was a larger number of Latinos who supported Donald Trump in Florida. We still don't know yet. These deep dives are going to be necessary as we look into that. But yes, I do believe in certain cases, and maybe in some swing areas, things like that might have made a difference.
This is a little bit a different topic, but as Biden fills his cabinet, Congressman Lieu, should he be pulling senators out of their seats, given how close the Senate seats are?
I don't think it would be wise for him to nominate a senator if the governor of that state is Republican.
Correct.
That's my view. I'm sure he's very aware of that. So we'll see what happens, and he'll pick the best person he believes for whatever position it is that he needs to fill. But my general view is it's unlikely he would nominate a senator if the governor of that state was a Republican.
Agree.
Yeah. It's a little bit back to the Electoral College. So a lot of us got educated about Maine and Nebraska, having a split electoral electorate. Do you think other states should do that? We should convert to that.
That's a fascinating question. I actually don't know. I haven't thought about what that would do to the map. I'd have to look at it. Now the Nebraska 2 second congressional was quite interesting. Joe Biden won that district fairly convincingly, and our candidate lost it fairly convincingly. So the voters there were doing a lot of ticket splitting, voting for Joe Biden and then voting for the Republican incumbent member of Congress. So we need to figure out why those voters did that.
And I haven't thought about that at all. I haven't thought about it.
Okay.
I have. Can I say something?
Go ahead, Connie.
You know how gerrymandered the House is? The presidential race would be that gerrymandered. I don't think we want that. Just putting that out there.
Oh, I see you did it.
Actually, that's a good point.
Thank you.
Okay. How is it that Donald Trump won with now 246,000 dead from a virus that did not have to happen, and with the airline industry and the cruise industry decimated? I mean, he had won, but how did he get as much people voting for him?
So, that's something that my kids ask me all the time. And I tell them, you should just sit down and just watch Fox News one evening. And you'll see it's a very different reality that a lot of Americans see. And at the same time, this virus is sort of interesting in the sense that even though it's lethal, it's not quite lethal enough, I think, to be able to convince a lot of people that, for example, government lockdowns are the answer. It's sort of in this weird gray area where it doesn't sort of kill a humongous amount of people. I mean, we're talking about Ebola, right? No one would care if we locked down, everybody would go to lockdown, but it's not that. So it is sort of just, below the amount of deaths, I think, that would really freak a lot of people out. And so you do have a number of Americans who watch Fox News who simply take the position that, I'm willing to take the risk of contracting this virus and not have the economy shut down. I disagree with them. I don't think they're correct, but I can see, sort of based on how this virus, isn't killing 10 million people, that why they get to that conclusion. And so if you have that view, right, if your view is that government is overreacting and causing more harm with these lockdowns, then you're going to support, or you could support, Donald Trump. In other words, you're not going to blame these virus deaths on the president. You're simply going to take the view that this is sort of like a really bad flu that, yes, kills some people, but the response to it should be, we just, go forward and try to keep our economy afloat.
Sergio, you want to add to that? Or
I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, again, I look at my brother. I mean, he listens to Fox News all the time. He's at Costco on his phone listening to whatever he's listening to, and he believes everything they said. I remember, who was it? The mayor of RPV, who unfortunately got sick up on her party, Susan Brooks.
Yeah.
Early on, had a party. At that party, I had friends that were there. At that party, they were making fun of COVID. And they were talking about not wearing masks. Someone died from that party. And to them, it's like, whatever. And so I do believe that. I think there's some people who maybe are thinking, like the congress member said, it was a very bad flu, and we're putting people unemployed. People are losing their jobs and their homes for something that we Democrats overreacting. And they paint a good picture of that. I always tell my brother who's apolitical, Donald Trump's always going to have his base, always, no matter what, people are going to vote for him. Joe Biden is always going to have his base, no matter what, people are going to vote for him. And the reality is that the average voter, that's not us in this room, but the average voter who's in the middle is the person that's going to vote. And so a lot of those folks are seeing unemployment issues. A lot of people are seeing their jobs going away, hours being shut down. Those are the average voters. And I although we did see a lot of people die off this virus, I think when we do this deep down and we realize what the average American was talking about and thinking about, that might have some say in there.
Now, I do want to add, the reason Joe Biden is president, one reason is because the majority of Americans view Donald Trump as totally screwing up this pandemic.
That's right.
And they do blame him for these deaths. You're sort of asking about the people that voted for Trump, but the overwhelming majority of Americans did not share that view. So that's why Trump's a one-term president.
Correct.
And along that, what do you think the approach should be to these rising COVID cases?
Oh, I don't know.
Because it's in every state.
We're never going to get the economy back to normal until we suppress the virus. And that's because the overwhelming majority of Americans, because of what they say, actually don't want to get the virus. Because even if it doesn't kill you, it can knock you out for weeks. It could send you to the hospital, or your loved ones. And so when you look at these polls, so polling on voter turnout and who they're going to vote for president or candidates is tricky and hard. And I think some people do lie to posters, but it's much less likely people are lying to posters about issues they care about or about what they think about certain policies. So poll after poll shows that the overwhelming majority of Americans support wearing masks, for example. The overwhelming majority of Americans actually want a mask mandate. And the overwhelming majority of Americans don't want this virus, want it to be suppressed. And again, that's another reason Joe Biden is going to be inaugurated on January 20th, is that most Americans understand that we have to get this virus under control. And that's what the Biden-Harris administration is going to do. And that's what the House of Representatives is going to work with him on as a first thing next year.
So one of the lies that's been spread has been where the Pfizer vaccine announcement came after the election instead of before the election. How do you combat something like that? Obviously there was no reason they didn't have the data before the election. But
yeah, I don't know enough about what happened with the timing of that. Now, just they're still in their trial. They don't actually have approval quite yet, and it's going to be a while before the ordinary American can get that vaccine. But the initial sort of phase 3 trial looks extremely promising.
So a lot of people are nervous that Trump has fired people. He's going to leave not only he's not doing a transition, but he's going to leave things very bad for Biden, both for maybe with the COVID, with the economy. What is your thoughts on that?
It reminds me of that saying that right before dawn, it goes pitch black. So I think what we're seeing now is an angry president who can't deal with the fact that he lost, and he's just sort of taking it out on different people. I don't think his firings at the Department of Defense are because he has some grand strategy to execute some bizarre Department of Defense policy none of us have seen coming. I think he was just mad at Secretary of Defense Esper for not being sufficiently loyal to him. I think there's some other folks he was mad at that he didn't perceive as being sufficiently loyal to him, so he's firing them out of spite. I don't think he fired Esper because, he wanted to, I don't know, nuke North Korea, and Esper didn't go along with it. I don't think that's it at all. I just think he's firing people because he's angry.
But can he trash things to such an extent that's going to make the Biden transition that much harder?
Well, he could trash things for, the next 68 days, and then Biden can just reverse it.
Okay. Sergio, you have any comment on that, or?
No, not really.
Okay.
It's more on the policy side.
Okay. All right. So I think you've answered most of the questions. Someone asked about, there's still a shortage of PPE, specifically N95 mask, and who is to blame for that? I don't know if that's something you would know, Congressman, or.
I don't know why there still be a shortage right now. I mean, you can go on Amazon and buy masks. So I don't know why that is. So if there is a shortage at certain places, feel free to have them contact me or my office, and we can,
Well, they're not talking here in California. They just meant, across the United States. Especially in these states that didn't do anything to prevent the virus.
Oh, I see. Yeah, well, I suppose it's possible if you're a hospital in a red state and your entire government apparatus didn't really take this pandemic seriously, you might be short given the sudden surge of this virus in a lot of states across America. So I can see that happening. But overall, people should be able to get PPE right now.
Yeah. I mean, definitely California is in good standing, but I think they were talking about other states. The other question that's come up a couple of times, I haven't mentioned it, has to do with the gap between African-American women versus men voting for Biden versus Trump. So more African-American women came out for Biden, but I believe the percent is still there, greater with women and men, African-American women and men, but I think it went down for men, that some of them went for Trump. So they wanted to know why.
So I haven't seen all the data yet, and it's still not complete because not all their votes have been counted yet. I suspect it's more a male-female issue. I think you're going to see more men voting for Trump among all races. That's my gut sense of what the data is going to show.
Okay. And then with this latest thing at the Supreme Court with the ACA, what is your view? What do you think that the Supreme Court justices will do on the ACA? And what is your update for how we can?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. So if you base it on the oral arguments, it looks pretty promising. So the actual issue is not whether or not the entire ACA is unconstitutional. It has to do with, if we rule one provision of it as unconstitutional, does that then mean the entire law is unconstitutional? And based on the comments from Chief Justice Roberts and even Brett Kavanaugh, it doesn't look like they think that's a very good argument that the Republicans are making, that somehow if we strike down this one provision in the ACA related to a tax issue, that somehow the entire law goes down. So if that's the case, then what will likely happen is they'll strike down this one tax-related issue, and then the rest of ACA will continue to stand. That's my best guess at what the Supreme Court would do.
Speaking of the Supreme Court, Justice Alito had a horrible speech the other day to the Federalists. Any comment on that? It was just so extreme.
Yeah, it was a really bizarre rant for a Supreme Court justice to give, number one. But number two, he was just factually wrong. And I didn't understand where he was coming from, because he started talking about, religious liberty and the court's decision and that, allowed gay marriage. That decision has to do with what government can and can't do.
Right.
So in other words, government can't discriminate, but it had nothing to do with religions. Churches and religions are free to discriminate on who they want to marry or not marry. Nothing in that decision says the Catholic Church has to marry gay people. It just has to do with this certificate that you're going to get from the state of California or the state of Arkansas, whatever state it is. You can't discriminate based on, the government can't discriminate based on who the person loves. So it was sort of bizarre that Alito even sort of started talking about religious liberty, because that case had nothing to do with religious liberty. And then he started talking about how somehow that was, affecting free speech. Well, quite the opposite. He said people are now scared to, talk about marriage as, being between a man and a woman. And my view is, again, that has nothing to do with government. If your neighbor wants to call you a bigot, that's protected speech. The First Amendment protects government from restricting your speech. So if government came down with a law saying you can't call people bigots, that would be an infringement on free speech. And Alito seemed to have reversed that on his head. So it was just really bizarre for a Supreme Court justice to give the rant that he gave, because not only was it extreme, it was just factually wrong.
I mean, he was also speaking about the COVID restrictions affecting, churches being able to. It was a rant on a lot of different issues.
It was.
So speaking of that, what do you think should be done about the balance in the Supreme Court? What is your opinion?
So the problem wasn't that the Republicans nominated a Supreme Court justice in the last year of Trump's presidency, that Trump did that. The problem was that they held up Merrick Garland's confirmation
4 years earlier.
So I'm not going to sort of prejudge Justice Barrett. I think it's fine to see how she decides in some of these cases and how she writes and so on. And then see how the Supreme Court progresses. But if it sort of gets sort of way out of line, then I do think we should look at different things we can do to make it much more acceptable to American people. I think it's a little too early to make a decision on that.
Did you want to say something, Sergio?
No, I too think it's a little early. I mean, I know that yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay. I'm gonna I know we're going, some of the chats are going down that path, but I did want to throw this out. In the Paso Verdes Democrats endorsed this resolution to get rid of Sheriff Villanueva, and I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that, for both of you, in terms of electing, supporting.
So I'm not trying to dodge this question. I just don't have enough information. So send me the resolution and let me just read about the various articles. I don't know enough about the various incidents and disputes and facts related to the sheriff.
This was a county party resolution, and we were one of the clubs that was asked to also endorse it. And it didn't pass at the county party. It got 55% of the vote only and needed 60%. But the resolution asked that he resign. It wasn't asking that the Board of Supervisors remove him from office.
Thanks for the clarification.
I want to clarify.
Yeah.
Well, I voted on that resolution. I voted no on the resolution. I was one of the 45% that voted no, I guess. My issue with it was that I felt like, my personal opinion, obviously, I felt like the sheriff did not have ample time to defend himself. And in the 4 minutes that he was given, or 5 minutes that he was given to say his piece, he brought up a lot of good points. And at that very moment, I just had a choice of voting yes or no. And I thought there was just too much information out there that's still to be asked and questioned. So I voted no. The official position of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party is we don't have a position asking them to resign.
Oh, okay, all right. So I know that came in, it was like a November 10th vote, Connie?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. All right.
But it was very contentious. It was very emotional. There was a lot of people passionate on both sides. But yeah, it was deep.
Okay, well, good to know, good to know. That was a last minute board decision for us as well. Okay. There's a few other things here, but I wanted to take, I know you have to leave at 4, so wanted to have some closing discussion here, and then we were going to also acknowledge some of the new people that have joined us today. So do you want to go first, Congressman Lieu, and then we'll have Chair Sergio go?
Sure. So thank you, Ann, for moderating. I want to thank all of you for participating. It's an honor to be on here with my friend Sergio. So we have a lot of good news. On January 20th, you're going to get a Democratic president, and then you're going to get the first vice president in U.S. history who was a woman, an African-American, and an Asian American. That's pretty amazing. You know, I remember when Barack Obama was inaugurated, and my 2 children were too young to vote. When Kamala Harris gets inaugurated and Joe Biden gets inaugurated, my 2 children are still too young to vote. So let's not forget the remarkable progress our country has made these last 12 years. At the same time, I think we took 1 step back with the Donald Trump presidency, but we're going to take 2 steps forward. And you're going to see, I think, a very competent, compassionate Biden-Harris administration that does really simple things like listen to science. And that's going to make all the difference in the world. And a year from now, we're not going to be in the same position doing these Zoom calls, because there would have been, I think, not just 1, but several vaccines that are pretty darn effective to American people. I believe their virus would have been suppressed, and the economy is going to start roaring back. So I think things look good for the next year, and I look forward to working with all of you as we continue to make our local community and our state and our country an even better place to live, work, and play.
Thank you. Congratulations on your reelection.
Thank you.
Okay.
I do want to say thank you to Congressmember Lieu for his leadership in the House, for his leadership on Twitter. I mean, I love reading your tweets, Congressmember. It makes me happy every day to do that. I want to take the opportunity to thank again all of you for all that you did in this election. From the phone calls, the text messages, the postcards, everything that we did to ensure that we elected Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. As I mentioned earlier, California made 38% of all calls into the battleground states. So when we know that those battleground states did well, it's because of you. It's because of Californians who spent time on the phones, calling and texting. So I want to say thank you. Remind you that in 51 days, we have the Georgia runoff. And I'm going to be sending information to your president and to your leadership on how to make some calls, do some text messages to contact our fellow Americans in Georgia on this election. And then again, as the Congress member said, in 66 days, we have a new president in this country. And in 2008, I remember I shed tears. I was so happy. I shed tears for 2 reasons. I was very happy that Barack Obama won. And I remember just crying. I couldn't believe it. And then about 10 minutes later, I shed tears because Prop 8 had passed. And I remember saying I was going to do everything in my power and I would never be disappointed again, or at least not feel that I didn't do enough. And then this time around, we saw Kamala Harris, a woman, an African-American, an Asian American, about to become the most powerful woman in the history of our country. And so it was a great, great moment. Again, thank you for all that you did. And if I can make one official Democratic Party announcement, Ann, the new term for delegates starts at the convention. And we have a convention. It's going to be in April, the end of April. It's going to be a virtual convention. And so the first part is to elect delegates to that convention. And because of COVID and because of all these new rules, it's going to be an entire brand new process. I will be having a Zoom meeting on Thursday at 7 o'clock. I'm going to put the link right now in the chat. If you want to sign up, I'm going to go over the entire process on how one becomes a delegate under this COVID era, because it will change. If you participated in ADEMS before, throw all that out. It doesn't work that way anymore. It is going to be a brand new process for this time around. And so I will be putting that in the link, and I invite you all to come and participate on Thursday at 7 o'clock so that you can learn or tell others. And please share it with your club members, share it with other club members, because it's going to be a very different process. And on that note, Anne, thank you for the opportunity to share with you this afternoon.